Chapter 5. There was a split second then that seemed like a year. I thought of many things, but none of them were any good. It was a devil of a place to die without even a human hand to help me under. And then Duani flung her arms around me.
"You're all so full of dying and big thoughts," she yelled at them, "and you're all paired off or so old you can't do anything but think. What about me? I don't have anyone to talk to, and I'm sick of wandering alone, thinking how I'm going to die. Let me have him just for a little while. I told you I'd share my water."
On earth, a child might talk that way about a stray dog, and it is written in an old book that a live dog is better than a dead lion. I hoped they would let her keep me. They did. Rule looked at Duani with a sort of wary compassion and lifted his hand. "Wait," he said to the men with the weapons. "I have thought how this human may be useful to us. We have so little time left now that it is a pity to waste any of it, yet much of it must be used up in tending the machine. He could do that labor, and a man can keep alive on very little water." The others thought that over. Some of them dissented violently, not so much on the grounds of water as that it was unthinkable that a human should intrude on the last days of Shandakor. Corin had said the same thing, but Rule was an old man. The tufts of his pointed ears were colorless as glass, and his face was graven deep with years, and wisdom had distilled in him its bitter brew. "A human of our own world, yes, but this man is of Earth, and the men of Earth will come to be the new rulers of Mars as we were the old. And Mars will love them no better than she did us, because they are as alien as we. So it is not unfitting that he should see us out." They had to be content with that. I think they were already so close to the end that they did not really care. By ones and twos they left as though already they had wasted too much time away from the wonders that there were in the streets outside. Some of the men still held the weapons on me, and others went and brought precious chains, such as the human slaves had worn, shackles, so that I could not escape. They put them on me, and Duani laughed. "Come," said Rule, "and I will show you the machine." He led me from the room and up a winding stair. There were tall embrasures, and looking through them, I discovered that we were in the base of the very high tower with the globe. They must have carried me back to it after Duani had chased me with her laughter and her pebbles. I looked out over the glowing streets, so full of splendor and of silence, and asked Rule why there were no ghosts inside the tower. "You have seen the globe with the crystal rods?" "Yes." "We are under the shadow of its core. There had to be some retreat for us into reality, otherwise we would lose the meaning of the dream." The winding stair went up and up. The chain between my ankles clattered musically. Several times I tripped on it and fell.
"Never mind," Duani said. "You'll grow used to it."
We came at last into a circular room high in the tower, and I stopped and stared. Most of the space in that room was occupied by a web of metal girders that supported a great gleaming shaft. The shaft disappeared upward through the roof. It was not tall, but very massive, revolving slowly and quietly. There were traps, presumably for access to the offset shaft and the cogs that turned it. A ladder led to a trap in the roof. All the visible metal was sound, with only a little surface corrosion. What the alloy was, I don't know, and when I asked Rule, he only smiled rather sadly. "Knowledge is found," he said, "only to be lost again. Even we of Shandakor forget." Every bit of that enormous structure had been shaped and polished and fitted into place by hand. Nearly all the Martian peoples work in metal. They seem to have a genius for it, and while they are not and apparently never have been mechanical, as some of our races are on Earth, they find many uses for metal that we have never thought of. But this before me was certainly the high point of the metal worker's craft. When I saw what was down below, the beautifully simple power plant, and the rotary drive setup with fewer moving parts than I would have thought possible, I was even more respectful. "How old is it?" I asked, and again Rule shook his head. "Several thousand years ago there is a record of the yearly hosting of the shadows, and it was not the first." He motioned me to follow him up the ladder, bidding Duani sternly to remain where she was. She came anyway. There was a railed platform open to the universe, and directly above it swung the mighty globe with its crystal rods that gleamed so strangely. Shandakor lay beneath us, a tapestry of many colors, bright and still, and out along the dark sides of the valley the tribesmen waited for the light to die. "When there is no one left to tend the machine, it will stop in time, and then the men who have hated us so long will take what they want of Shandakor. Only fear has kept them out this long. The riches of half a world flowed through these streets, and much of it remained." He looked up at the globe. "Yes," he said, "we had knowledge. More, I think, than any other race of Mars." "But you wouldn't share it with the humans." Rule smiled. "Would you give little children weapons to destroy you? We gave men better plowshares and brighter ornaments, and if they invented a machine, we did not take it from them. But we did not tempt and burden them with knowledge that was not their own. They were content to make war with sword and spear, and so they had more pleasure and less killing, and the world was not torn apart." "And you? How did you make war?" "We defended our city. The human tribes had nothing that we coveted, so there was no reason to fight them except in self-defense. When we did, we won." He paused. "The other non-human races were more stupid or less fortunate. They perished long ago." He turned again to his explanations of the machine. "It draws its power directly from the sun. Some of the solar energy is converted and stored within the globe to serve as the light source. Some is sent down to turn the shaft."
"What if it should stop," Duani said, "while we're still alive?"
She shivered, looking out over the beautiful streets. "It won't, not if the Earthman wishes to live." "What would I have to gain by stopping it?" I demanded. "Nothing, and that," said Rule, "is why I trust you. As long as the globe turns, you are safe from the barbarians. After we are gone, you will have the pick of the loot of Shandakor." How I was going to get away with it afterward, he did not tell me. He motioned me down the ladder again, but I asked him, "What is the globe, Rule? How does it make the shadows?" He frowned. "I can only tell you what has become, I'm afraid, mere traditional knowledge. Our wise men studied deeply into the properties of light. They learned that light has a definite effect upon solid matter, and they believed, because of that effect, that stone and metal and crystalline things retain a memory of all that they have seen. Why this should be, I do not know." I didn't try to explain to him the quantum theory and the photoelectric effect, nor the various experiments of Einstein and Millikan and the men who followed them. I didn't know them well enough myself, and the old High Martian is deficient in such terminology. I only said, "The wise men of my world also know that the impact of light tears away tiny particles from the substance it strikes." I was beginning to get a glimmering of the truth. Light patterns cut in the electrons of metal and stone. sound patterns cut in unlikely-looking mediums of plastic, each needing only the proper needle to recreate the recorded melody or the recorded picture. "They constructed the globe," said Hrull. "I do not know how many generations that required, nor how many failures they must have had, but they found at last the invisible light that makes the stones give up their memories." In other words, they had found their needle. What wavelength or combination of wavelengths in the electromagnetic spectrum flowed out from those crystal rods, there was no way for me to know. But where they probed the walls and the paving blocks of Shandakor, they scanned the hidden patterns that were buried in them and brought them forth again in form and color, as the electron needle brings forth whole symphonies from a little rigid disk. How they had achieved sequence and selectivity was another matter. Hrull said something about the memories having different lengths. Perhaps he meant depth of penetration. The stones of Shandakor were ages old, and the outer surfaces would have worn away. The earliest impressions would be gone altogether, or at least have become fragmentary and extremely shallow. Perhaps the scanning beams could differentiate between the overlapping layers of impressions by that fraction of a micron difference in depth. Photons only penetrate so far into any given substance, but if that substance is constantly growing less in thickness, the photons would have the effect of going deeper. I imagine the globe was accurate in centuries, or numbers of centuries, not in years. However it was, the shadows of a golden past walked the streets of Shandakor, and the last men of the race waited quietly for death, remembering their glory. Hrull took me below again and showed me what my tasks would be, chiefly involving a queer sort of lubricant and a careful watch over the power leads. I would have to spend most of my time there, but not all of it. During the free periods, Duani might take me where she would. The old man went away. Duani leaned herself against a girder and studied me with an intense interest.
"How are you called?"
she asked. "John Ross."
"John Ross,"
she repeated and smiled. She began to walk around me, touching my hair, inspecting my arms and chest, taking a child's delight in discovering all the differences there were between herself and what we call a human. And that was the beginning of my captivity.